Welcome to the Vietnamese Poetry Literature channel. Today we will listen to the work Sunshine in the Garden by author Thach Lam. Let's listen. Ton walked on the station platform, leisurely and absent-mindedly. The strong wind stuck his clothes tightly to his body, making the cold more poignant and damp. Even though it wasn't raining, Ton felt as if he felt rain and dust in his heart, sadness and depression, a sadness that was not profound, but gentle, that paralyzed the soul. He didn't want to remember, it seemed like he wanted to forget with that disappointment. The answer of Mr. Zahn, the publisher, still echoes in Ton's ears in a low and unpleasant tone. Your books are not welcomed by anyone. Ton pursed his lips, keeping a natural, calm look like someone who had often thought about that. He put his hand on the manuscript of Ancient Dreams, curled the top of the paper, and did not answer. Mr. Zahn continued. Indeed. 2,000 copies of The Friend were printed, but 200 have not yet been sold. Not to mention sending it to newspapers that have been lost for hundreds of years. I have never printed a book that is so difficult to sell. He smacked his lips and looked at Ton, intending to let him understand that the capital of 200 silver he spent had not yet been fully recovered. However, Ton kept trying. He held up the manuscript of Old Dreams, with trembling hands. He picked up both ends and was about to put them in his bag, then asked softly, "What about this book, mister?" The expected answer came immediately, with unshakable determination. "Oh, are you still planning to publish this book? I'll admit, if you have all the gold I don't dare print it anymore." Ton didn't understand why he smiled even though he didn't want to. It was difficult for him to clearly articulate the meaning of that smile. He took his hat and briefcase, stood up, took his boss's soft and languid hand and went out. On the street, only then did Ton realize his disappointment, and let it overflow into his soul, without resisting. He had the feeling of losing his footing and drowning in sadness, and felt an infinite pity for himself. During sleepless nights in the countryside, he still dreamed of a brilliant success worthy of his talent. At those times, Ton was as happy as sipping a cup of strong wine, but the alcohol gradually made him intoxicated. He thought his book had been warmly welcomed by the world, the newspapers praised each other, and sold out in the month of publication. Mr. Zahn will put a stack of silver on the table, welcome him warmly and say flatteringly, "Your books sell very well. Indeed, I have never seen a writer as acclaimed as him." Ton will smile politely and discreetly, accepting that compliment like someone who doesn't care about the petty things about that fame. He will present the book, Old Dreams. Mr. Zahn will respectfully take it and happily accept it for publication immediately. But the truth. Ton's lips curled a little bitterly, and he wondered if he should mock him. He didn't think about going out in Hanoi anymore, so he immediately rented a car to go to the station to get a ticket. Ton wanted to immediately leave this indifferent province, hoping to see his small, warm room again, the writing desk with the shadow of the trees in the garden swaying across its surface, every time the sunlight shined across it. Ton looked at the clock. 3 o'clock. The train would probably never come. The railway line to the south runs parallel and straight under the overcast sky, seemingly making the distance seem even more sad. All the earnest dreams of youth, of the artist's soul, the beautiful dreams built while drunk, all fade away with the cold wind. Ton's soul is as bare as a low field whose rice has already been harvested. When the train arrived, he was just a depressed person getting on the bus. He went down to third class, opened the car door and entered. Ton was pleased to see that there was no one in the empty carriage, except for a train guard sitting in a corner recording, not bothering to look up while he passed. Ton also threw himself on the chair, pulling his collar up to cover his neck, the cold was so painful. Then quietly let the bustling sound of the train lull me. In the distance, fields turned to villages. Ton's thoughts also flowed, A quietness replaced the sadness. Ton found himself eager and hopeful again. In fact, The fact that the book did not sell well did not prove that he was not talented. Many famous writers around the world were not initially forgotten or ignored by people. Public indifference is often a sign of an outstanding talent, not understood by people, because it goes beyond the usual cliché. Tan consoled himself when he thought he could be that talent. He reviewed the books he had read, in which many experienced writers advised, the artist must not need public acclaim, because he himself enjoys the magical pleasure of creativity. Being welcomed often only harms the artist, because it makes the artist complacent and a slave to the reader's preferences. Tan found those thoughts to be truly profound. There was nothing more intoxicating and immersive than the pleasure he felt every time he picked up a pen to express his feelings, seeing the characters he created become flexible on the page. He had that vibe, had the sky, the clouds, the sunshine and the flowers, all the living things around him. The low clouds flying over the green rice fields are an eternal and loving poem. Tan bent down and looked out of the car, engrossed in watching the scenery through the white smoke that the wind blew across the road. His heart gradually calmed down, and the scene before his eyes felt cheerful again, although at that time it began to rain and dust. Tan stood up, crouched down to look through the glass window, letting the cold wind blow into his hair and touch his skin. Car parked. A small station, next to a few thatched cottages. The noise of people going up and down echoed loudly. Tan caught a glimpse of a young girl getting into the car. Suddenly he turned around. As soon as the young woman slipped through the carriage door, a gust of wind rushed in, and the pieces of her dye flew up to reveal a red sweater. The young girl looked around, saw that every seat in the car was cramped, hesitated a bit, then went to the seat in front of Tan to put down her luggage. A few packages wrapped in paper and a small suitcase made of rattan. Tan smiled because of that closeness. He looked intently at the girl. An oval face, an ordinary beauty. Clothes look half provincial, half rural. Pupil? Trade? Tan cannot be predicted clearly. The young girl also raised her face to look at him, then lowered her head. Her beautiful hands opened the suitcase with a bright vulture lock. Tan didn't look away. He had the exciting feeling of being about to enter the girl's intimate life. The suitcase lid was slightly open. Tan caught a glimpse of neatly folded clothes, a white cotton towel and a fresh bar of fragrant soap. Suddenly he vibrated from head to toe as if electricity was flowing. The young girl had just taken out a book, which was his book, Friend. The book is brand new, as if I just bought it and haven't read it yet. Tan saw the blue color of the book's cover, the words of the book's title and the author's name, which was his name, dancing before his eyes as the young woman put the book on her lap, took a knife and carefully cut out each page one by one. Tan couldn't say clearly how he felt at that time. He was shocked, half afraid, half happy. The young girl raised the book in front of her face and leaned against the chair to read it intently. Tan looked at the pretty hand holding the book. He listened attentively to the sound of new paper rustling each time a page was turned. Tan felt like a young woman once turned over the pages of her soul, becoming closer and more intimate. He nervously commented on the reader's face, the influence of his writing, as if a young woman was reading his deep thoughts. But he had no way to explain further. Tan wanted to call himself Van Son, the author. He wished that right now a friend would come to see him, a friend would pat his shoulder and ask, "Hey Mr. Van Son. How is your book, friend, selling well?" The imaginary city would politely answer, "Quite good," and the young girl, surprised, would put down the storybook and look at him with wide eyes in awe and happiness. He will see the young girl hesitate, her cheeks are slightly red, charming, softly saying, "I'm sorry for the suddenness, but are you Van Son? Oh so lucky." Then she asked him for his autograph on the book, and would be cutely awkward, praising him as a talented writer. But there are no friends, other than the girl with him. The girl was still watching attentively, and the guy was impatient, restless, squirming in his chair. Is just one person reading your writing enough to make you so moved? The young girl suddenly became strangely charming. Her lips were red, her eyes under long, curved eyelashes, following each line of writing, soft as velvet, as if caressing his heart. All of Tan's sadness and disappointment because of the publisher's words were all gone. In the coldness of his soul, that young woman brought warmth and care. At least there was someone who understood him. Tan guessed that this young girl, when in the countryside, under the light bulb, or in the afternoon under the flowers, had once dreamed about the stories she read, and her heart had been moved by the status of the person in the story. The girl put down the book, slightly squinting her eyes and looking out. The row of houses on the outskirts of the southern province can be seen in the distance. The young girl opened her suitcase again, tried the lock again and prepared another piece of luggage. He sighed. He knew the girl would get off at this station, and he had to go a few more stations to get home. Anxious, Tan realized that up until now he had not found a way to let the girl know her name or get to know her. Many times, he wanted to start a conversation with the girl, but for some reason, each time he awkwardly stopped. The predetermined words he didn't want to say left his mouth, making him angry with himself. Tan stood up, sat down, wondering. The young girl looked at Tan, one hand on the suitcase, the other hand neatly tucking her shirt. The train started to go slowly, entering the station. Tan frantically stood up, went to the front of the carriage, leaned against the door and looked down, as if paying close attention to the bustling scene down the street. When the young girl carrying her suitcase passed in front of her, Tan leaned close to her side. The girl's hair gently brushed his chest, her black hair covering her pink ears and beautiful round neck. He bent down again, completely outside the train, watching the young girl blend into the crowd of people. From time to time he noticed the girl's slim and slender shoulders among the passengers until the girl disappeared into the station. Tan felt like he had lost a dear friend. Dejected, he leisurely returned to his original place. Suddenly Tan stopped, and his eyes opened wide. On the chair, where the young woman sat, her newly opened book, Friend, lay still. Tan quickly took it and looked out. He thought he still had time to send the young woman back. But the train is already running. The cold wind began to blow strongly. Tan threw himself into the chair, fingering the book, turning the pages over and over. It seemed like there was still some warmth of that young woman lingering on the pages. But suddenly, it was as if a needle pierced his heart. Isn't that the girl who forgot? Who knows, maybe she didn't leave it behind because the bad book made her unhappy. Who knows, maybe she didn't know that he was the author and intentionally left the book behind to show her blandness. Tan sighed softly. These doubtful thoughts stirred in his mind. Tan fondled the book as if he could find the answer in it. Then, absent-mindedly, he put the book down in his lap, pressed his forehead against the glass door and looked out. The dusty rain had stopped a long time ago and the gray clouds parted, letting in a soft ray of golden sunlight gliding over the young green rice fields, so clear and fragile that it seemed like it was about to extinguish. Tan saw that the joy in his heart was so pure and fragile, just a little doubt, a little coldness was enough to melt it away. Tan didn't want to think anymore. He gently closed the book, and sat quietly, as if dreaming. At the end of the work, please support me with the like button and subscribe to the channel to listen to more works.